work it out, Jewish person to Jewish person,
I hope
than
so.
if nobody knows anybody,
Yeah. Anyway, I'm
Let's
really
see.
proud of it. One of these days, I'll show you what I've done.
Yeah, there's somebody in Chabad of Phoenix. Okay, so tonight is Yotes Kislev. It's called the Rosh Hashanah of Chabad. Today is a deeply spiritual day
The Rosh Hashanah
of Chassidus. Yeah, so it commemorates the first Chabad Rebbe going to prison and coming out of prison on this day. He went to prison. Well, he went to prison for. Someone already sent me the link.
Wow.
Yeah. And he went to prison. He was really tattletaled on. He was framed. He went to jail
By his fellow Jews?
by his fellow Jews.
Wow.
Well, Jews back then, Orthodox Jews, they were, they had such fervent beliefs. Like it was hard for them when someone didn't share a belief. They had to, because. So, anyways, he was framed. It's a whole long story. He ended up in, prison. He ended up having to explain a lot of the concepts in the Tanya into Russian to the Russian Tsar and to everyone like that. Yeah.
They wanted to know about that?
Well, they were curious if they were counter government.
Okay.
And they were rebellious. It was a very difficult prison stay. Ultimately, they told him. Ultimately, the Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov came and visited him. Now they were passed away already, but they came.
Excuse me. The first, I thought.
The first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe is the first Chabad Rebbe. So Chabad is intellectual. That's the difference between the other ones. The other ones are, when we study Kabbalah, so most Kabbalah, in its origin, you can't really understand it intellectually. In other words, you need like a sixth sense. What we're studying in our Kabbalah class is essentially Chabad interpretation. Chabad interpretation is basically Kabbalistic teachings, which are kind of brought into intellectual ideas. So you could approach it intellectually.
But the Baal Shem Tov was the first Chassid, right?
Yeah.
So when you say the first one to the jail.
Yeah, so the Baal Shem Tov was the first Hasidic Rebbe. He was revealing Kabbalistic outlooks in the world. So,
but who was jailed then?
The Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is the first Chabad Rebbe. He was the student of the Baal Shem Tov. So,
but when you say the first Chabad Rebbe, that was the Baal Shem Tov, right?
The first Hasidic Rebbe.
Oh.
So the big divide between Chabad and Hasidim was should the Kabbalistic works and should spirituality be accessible to people intellectually. A lot of Rebbes felt that it's an impossible feat. Right. In other words, it's an impossible feat. And the Chabad Rebbe said, no, when Mashiach comes, the mystical ideas will be totally open, totally revealed, and they'll be understood also in intellect. And therefore, as a preparation for Mashiach, we have to start trying to understand it and grasping it.
So what's the relationship between Hasidism and Chabad?
So Chabad is a sect of Hasidism.
Is it part of
the difference between the Chabad Chassidim and other Chassidim is the other Chassidim would have a Rebbe. Now in those days the Rebbe was usually someone who was a miracle worker, who was deeply transcendent to the world. And then you'd have a Rebbe and you would just follow him because he knows his stuff.
Right.
He knows he's going to guide you. He's going to give you your spiritual way that you need to serve God. The Chabad Rebbe was kind of like, no, you have to do it on your own. So he's going to give.
Let me shut that door.
Sure. So the Chabad Rebbes were basically kind of teaching like, no, your brain has to be a reciprocal for it on your own, even though it's more difficult. So what did they do?
I would think almost impossible.
Well, so what they did is they started breaking it down in intellect. It was a big deal. And other Rebbes were like, oh, it's impossible, or people are going to misunderstand it. And they said, no, we got to do it anyways.
So the Hasidim said it's impossible.
Well, other Rebbes from the Hasidic sect. So actually, in fact, the Maggid of Mezrich and the Baal Shem Tov visited the Alter Rebbe in prison. Their souls visited him. And they told him, they said, the real reason why you're in jail is because you're spreading this methodology of Hasidism. And the world's not ready for it until Mashiach comes. The world's not ready for people to have such a deep relationship, intellectual relationship. Because once you get something in your intellect, you're able to have a complete relationship with it. You're able to think about it, meditate on it, and it's able to transform your body, transform your emotions, everything like that. It's able to become a reality. If you can't get something into your brain, it's hard to take it on as a reality unless you see it. And if you see it, it doesn't even necessarily internalize fully sometimes. When we slowly internalize concepts in our brain, then it changes our perspective.
I think it's real hard to say for sure one way or the other, because you were talking about the power of intuition, right?
So intuition
doesn't. You're saying it arises from intuition.
So what happens with intuition is when you have intuition, it's sometimes either you have a very strong intuition, and it's constant, so that becomes your reality, or you have spiritual experiences once in a while, which sometimes override your being. And what happens when they override is you go back and forth.
Yeah, right.
Or, so Chabad Hasidus was basically, no, you can take it on intellectually, and if you take it on intellectually, it'll take longer to absorb, but it will absorb within the framework of your being. And therefore, you'll be able to live with God constantly, because you will have thought about it and meditated, and you're thinking and meditating, and you're understanding, and you're asking questions and everything like that.
That's probably longer lasting.
Longer lasting, it's constant. So the Alter Rebbe said, well, since it's about God, it does exist in your intellect, and we could. So the previous Rebbes came to him and said, hey, this is not supposed to be revealed until Mashiach comes.
Right.
So he said, should I stop? And they said, no. Now that you started it, you continue on until Mashiach comes. So then the Alter Rebbe got out on Yutas Kislev on the 19th of Kislev, which is tonight, tomorrow, and there's a whole story and everything like that. But the Hasidim always considered it was like the end of the decree on Hasidism, an integration of spirituality into our lives. So now it's a time of the year that we try and strengthen. We make new studying opportunities, and we make, we try and focus more on that in our life, because we do believe that if you focus on spirituality, if you focus on that, it'll transform your life, and it will also, if you integrate it into your life, it will give you a new perspective. Like the way I sometimes put it to other people, it's like, we always have a question: why do bad things happen?
Yeah, sure.
And so there's a conclusion, because God's not in control. But when you start to study Hasidism, and God is in control, and then everything is actually really good, and only good things happen, and that's like the secret to God. That's like the secret to creation.
That's a hard one to take.
So it's almost like the Alter Rebbe. Well, so that's why you study the concepts of how the world is created, and you study how the world works, and what's the mechanism of the world, and what's the purpose of the world. So that's like giving humans too much information. If we have all that information, then we're able to deepen our relationship with God beyond struggles. So that's what the Tanya and the Alter Rebbe were revealing. They're revealing like the secret to the world. So it's like almost like in heaven there were voices kind of from angels, and they kind of said, hey, that's not supposed to be around. Life is supposed to be hard. But nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe was told to continue teaching it. So that is what you can tap into if you study. It's like if sometimes we look for an explanation how a bad thing happens. But if the default is that
every religion addresses
yes,
that.
but if the default is that God created the world, and He's constantly creating the world,
Yeah.
and He's constantly in control, and it's good, and He says it's good, and everything like that, then your perspective doesn't come in a way, a bad thing happens, let me answer what the purpose is. Your perspective is, a good thing happened, let me try and understand why I think it's bad, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very, very deep exercise. All right, well, this is related to it. I figure let's go way ahead, and we'll go to the last parsha in Genesis. We have a few weeks till then. And this is a famous one which we've studied outside.
What page you on?
665.
665.
But I'd like to study it inside. It has to do with exile. Which book do you have?
I have
Shemos?
the wrong one. I have seen Shemos, which is
Okay, let me get you.
Exodus,
Let me
right?
get you Genesis. I'm sorry. So
Thank you.
all right. So it says,
For the redemption to be complete.
So it says, Vayikra Yaakov, from Pasuk, Vayikra Yaakov el banav v'yemer hos v'gid lechem, asher yikra es cham achar sayamim. I told you about this before. This is an amazing verse, with amazing commentary on it. It says Jacob called his son. This is right before Jacob dies. The Torah says.
Mhm.
He said, "Gather together, and I will tell you what will happen at the end of the." Yeah, you got that.
Yeah.
So
He wanted to reveal what happened at the end of days, but the Lord withdrew from him.
right. So it says, "Heyaschu v'agid lechem asher yikaschem ma'achar sayamim." Let me tell you what it said. What will happen at the end of the day. So this is the verse in the Torah,
Mhm.
and then the Torah continues with the story. It doesn't say. He doesn't say. It's like a abrupt end to the sentence, right? So he gathers his son. He says, "Let me tell you what happened at the end of the days,"
And he doesn't.
and he doesn't tell him. So Zagan Chazal. So what do the rabbis explain? The rabbis explain, and this is what do the rabbis explain? Bikesh Yaakov legalis lefanav ketz hayamin. V'nistalka min hashchina. The sages comment, and this is the sages in the Talmud. They're quoted in Rashi. Jacob wanted to tell them when the end of days would arrive, but the divine presence withdrew from him. So Jacob was about to tell them when, I guess, that what would happen at the end of days, and at that moment, he felt the divine presence leave him, so he did it. And that's why the Torah has that abrupt end to the sentence.
Why would Jacob know what would happen?
So
apparently God had revealed this to him.
apparently-
That's
well-
not in the Torah.
what?
That God revealed to him.
Correct. All we have in the Torah is this verse that says Jacob wanted to reveal the end of days, and he did it. So the Talmud says, why didn't he? Because he felt that the God's presence leave him. And when he felt God's presence leave him, we'll see. It says, "Doch Zicher, as mit sein wollen zum Magal sein, der Ketz Yaakov gewen äußer nicht stam bewiesen, as weist dem Ketz, nor a Teeles far de Shvatim, oder far de Yid Nachrim. Was far Teeles wollt jeden gehat von dem, was man wollt sie demalt Magal gewen dem Ketz. So it's for sure that Jacob raises a question. Yaakov certainly had a purpose in revealing it to them. He wasn't just telling them information. He had a reason.
Uh-huh.
What would be the reason for them to know when it's going to be for the kids and the kids' kids?
Well, we're talking about from parent to child, so it would be to get them to be observant and to pass on that information, I would assume.
So he wanted them to know, but why does he want them to know? Pass on information. It's like 4,000 years. Obviously, Judaism believes in the end of days. So he's not telling them, it doesn't say he's telling them that there is an end of days.
Right.
He's telling them that, in fact, we know that there's an end of days from the verse. From him not telling, we know that there's an end of days. When it's going to be. So
what will happen to you in the end of days?
Gather together and I will tell you what will happen in the end of days. So Yaakov, let's just see. Let's read the Gemara and Yaakov tells his son, "Gather together, I'll tell you what will happen in the end of days." Then he says, Yaakov sought to reveal to his sons when the end of the days would be. So he wanted to tell them, I guess included in what will happen is what will happen and when, and imagine like now we would say, okay, people always talk now, okay, there's a war, and after the war, Mashiach's going to come, or whatever it is, right? So probably he would tell them all the details at the end of the day, end of days.
So would the Jewish concept of end of days, is that a day of judgment for everybody? Is that included in that?
Well, so the end of days has tons of.
Because I'm thinking maybe he wanted to protect them, pass on to your children, that one day your descendants will be judged, so do not leave God.
Yeah. Well, so he probably wanted to tell them when, who, what, when, where, why. Yeah. Well, let's see. That's possible.
To protect them.
That's
Was it primarily to protect his descendants?
Yeah, that's so that's very possible. But we'll see the back and forth. We're going to see actually exactly what it is, because
Right, sure.
we're going to go through different commentators. Because seemingly the opposite is true. Wenn Yaakov wollte Magalig wenn dem Kates, was wird sein mit viele tausend Jahr später? If Jacob would tell them, in 5,000 years from now, 4,000 years from now, you're going to go and Mashiach's going to come, and this is going to happen, all these things are going to happen. Well, das nicht nur bebracht kein Tals, nur andere, aber das wird gepeilt bei Jeden als eine mörderliche Zerbrachenkeit von der Michas Ruach. So again, there's two sides to the coin here, and obviously we're going to say what Jacob intended and what God intended. So Jacob wanted to tell them. It likely wasn't just inside information; it was likely to help them. So we're saying, well, what would be the purpose? Like on the other hand, it might actually break their spirit, bring them to heartbreak. It's like, by the way, you're working for it. The Jewish people remember they're in Egypt now, and they know they're going to come out of Egypt. They know they're going to come out of Egypt, but imagine Jacob telling them, by the way, you're also going to suffer another couple thousand years after Egypt. At that point in time, the Jews didn't know that, right?
Jacob knew about the diaspora and all that.
Seemingly, he's telling them what's going to happen at the end of the days. You would have to know when they would be, what would be. We'll define some different. We'll define some different options. What it could be he's telling them. We'll define. But so right now, he wants to tell them when the Mashiach's going to come. What's the process of Mashiach coming? So seemingly, by giving them the knowledge that it's thousands of years later, inevitably he'd give that knowledge. He'd be opening it'd be hard to hear.
So Jacob knew about the Mashiach.
That's yeah. I mean, that's what he's talking about in the days.
And that's when the Mashiach comes.
Yeah.
Huh. Because I thought the first mention in the Torah actually was David and his descendants.
It's funny because actually one of the first mentions in the literal Torah is the word until you'll be king until Shiloh will come. That's what he tells.
Speaking to David?
That's what he's speaking to Judah. Jacob speaking to Judah, yeah. And then the Gemara says, well, who is Shiloh? And it quotes from the prophets, Shiloh is Mashiach. So that's a hint. But again, how much do you want it to explain? It's the Torah, but yeah,
the literal Torah says God says to Judah.
Jacob says to Judah.
Oh, okay. And his deathbed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's giving all these prophecies.
Right.
If you read through it, it's poetic, and then you read through the commentary. It says, oh well, this is referring to this thing.
I don't remember what it said about
Judah.
So
it's a very short parsha, and then it has tons of commentary because it's all poems. Yeah. But it also says, oh well, this word here is allusion to that thing that's going to happen to this nation, to this tribe, and this word is allusion to that thing that's going to happen to that tribe.
Right.
Okay. Well, Farshim for inference. So let's just go. Well, these are a bunch of different commentators' answer. As Yaakov had them, Kate's Gewalt Megalzain Nar Levanim. Some of the commentators ask this question. They say, what would be the purpose of the Jews knowing? Like, a lot of Jews, it would be like, oh, by the way, don't worry, in a couple thousand years, you'll be redeemed. So what would be the purpose? So one of the rabbis says, he sought to reveal it only to his sons. They were righteous. Jacob said, let me tell my sons, they're righteous. Obviously they're not going to carry on their service. They're not going to get frustrated if they know when it's going to be.
With the understanding they would pass it on to their children?
Maybe they would pass it on to the righteous children. Like certain people know, okay, this is my job. It's going to take thousands of years. I'm serving God. But certain people will be like, what? Imagine you're suffering in Egypt. And you're trying to get out of Egypt. And by the way, this isn't even the full extent of the suffering of the Jewish people.
Jacob knew that his great-grandchildren or whatever would become slaves.
Yeah.
We don't know how long after Jacob's death that they actually became slaves, do we?
We do. It's actually calculated. So basically, God tells Abraham 400 years. For 400 years, they'll become slaves.
Uh-huh.
And in the Jewish tradition, it could have been 400 years, but in the end, it was much less. God decided to count it from the time Isaac was born.
So how many years after Jacob's death did they become enslaved?
So I don't remember the exact years, but basically they became slaves after all 12 sons died. Okay. Only after the 12 sons died was there no more remembrance of the Egypt-Jewish relationship.
And they had a different pharaoh.
And then different pharaohs, different cycles. So yeah, as long as one of the sons was alive, they didn't become slaves. They were in Egypt with a total of 210 years.
Right. Do we know the last son to die?
Yeah, I think Levi.
Levi was?
Yeah, even though he wasn't the youngest.
That's not literal in the Torah, is it?
No. Well, I think it might hint into the Torah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so he knew the sons are righteous. Aber euch das hat der Eberstein nicht gewollt, kedei shelo yedel bei machem ram Yisrael shelo yadu shu leitem rechakes. So this is one of the commentators. He says, "Oh, well, it's very simple. Jacob wanted to tell his sons. He knew that his sons wouldn't lose hope; they wouldn't give up. But God said, hey, what about all the other people who are going to find out? Not everyone's so righteous. If you tell people that Mashiach's going to come, despite your work for thousands of years later,
Everybody's gonna know.
then everyone's going to know, and then everyone's going to be waiting around. I mean, nowadays we say, oh yeah, in 200 years Mashiach's going to come. You know, a lot of people will say like, okay, so I'm not going to experience it. However, this resolution is not entirely acceptable. Der Chash von Yedei Baim Lacharem, Aib Yaakov volt Megala gewend am Ketz zu alle Tzov Zin, is a Zach, was ist moving Garber Pashas. Hein von was hat Yaakov Melechatchila nicht gehat, gesagt Gedayatach zu Megala sein am Ketz Levan. Aber Iker, damit wird nicht verantwortet der Iker Shaila. Was für ein Tevetelis, wollte der Gila Ketz gekennt Peil sein, auf Bana, was der von Bikish Yaakov Megala sa Ketz Levan am Ketz. So the Rebbe really asked two questions, but one question is, he says, well, why indeed wouldn't Yaakov worry that the information would get out? Well, in other words, why did Yaakov think a secret could be kept? And God said, no, a secret can't be kept. If God left his presence, And second of all, really, even if a secret can be kept, why is it indeed beneficial for the children to know? So we might be able to think of ideas. The Rebbe is going to build like a thesis here based on different sources in the Torah, why it would be beneficial for the sons to know, and why Jacob was not worried about other people knowing.
Okay.
And it's going to, in this talk here, it's really going to bring essential information, Jewish information. What the Rebbe is going to bring is Jewish information, why, we need to know about Mashiach. And what about Mashiach? It's going to bring up ideas about Mashiach that we may be unaware of, which are essential ideas about him, but that's what the Rebbe is going to try to introduce here.
So that would be the benefit.
Yeah, the Rebbe is using this subject here to introduce kind of essential ideas about Mashiach that people might be unaware of. Now, again, in those times and nowadays, people are always confused about the Jewish Mashiach. In the prophets and in the Talmud, it's somewhat cryptic. So even in the Talmud, it seems like a lot of things, it's unclear what's literal and what's not. So we studied another long one about Mashiach, about the two stages of Mashiach and the Rambam. What the Rebbe is famous for doing is if you look at one thing about Mashiach, we're not sure if it's literal or cryptic or whatever it is, or literal or it's a metaphor. So what the Rebbe will do is he'll say, let's open the subject and look at all these things, and then when you see the bigger picture of all these different facts about Mashiach, then we're able to fit things in together. So that's what the Rebbe is going to do here, and that's what the Rebbe did in that talk about the Rambam.
I remember that we did that like 6 months ago, right?
Yeah, so we did two talks about the Rambam. One of them is why the Rambam brings the proof from the city of refuge. Right, that was one of them, and the other,
since it hasn't been fulfilled.
Yeah, and we said that the Rambam was saying that it's a mitzvah. He's trying to prove how it's a mitzvah to believe in Mashiach because it's connected with the mitzvahs of Torah. We said there are different parts of Torah. Some parts might be figurative. The only part that's not figurative is mitzvahs. When we read stories in the Torah, sometimes they might carry some metaphor in them. But when we read mitzvahs, they have to be literal. So the Rambam is saying that when Mashiach comes, and we're going to get the land, the promised land will be all the way because we'll add the 3 cities. So that was one subject. So in the Rebbe's style, what he'll do is a lot of times he'll take an idea about Mashiach, and then he'll say, let's open up the subject. And then when you're looking at one thing about Mashiach, God forbid, someone might even say it's referring to a Christian Messiah or whatever it is. But when you're looking at this whole subject together, and you're putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, then you're able to see that the Torah has quite a clear understanding of what Mashiach is. Okay. So before that, we'll get to some minor questions, technical questions. Now, these are kind of interesting technical questions. Euch darf verstehen. We also need to understand. In Chazal gefinden zwei Dees. So there are two opinions of why Jacob could not tell his sons. We said one so far. We said he was going to when the Shekhinah left him. Mm-hmm. Right? In Chazal gefinden wir zwei Dees. We find two opinions. Der Kates in Alam Gavarn, Euch von Yaakovin. One is one opinion says that Yaakov no longer knew the date, no longer knew the time, what's going to happen at the end of the days. Via state in Medrash, Ba legalis lahamas haketz v'niskasa v'menu. As it says in Medrash, he wanted to reveal it. So the Midrash, we quoted from the Talmud. The Midrash's version says he was about to say it and it was hidden for him. Right? So he wanted to say it and it was hidden from him. And another Midrash it says it was hidden from him. So you can imagine Jacob, he was about to say something and he, I forgot what I was going to say. Right? So that's one opinion. He himself forgot. Von Yaakov is there niskasa gevarn erhat abram nit megala given levan. Sorry, is nit niskasa gevarn erhat nit abram nit megala given levan. If we read Rashi, it says he wanted to say it, but the Shechina left him. So that means he still knew it.
Right.
He just had the sensation, and he said, "Whoa, something's wrong with me saying this.
Right.
I feel like this is wrong."
No longer authorized.
Correct. Exactly. So there's these actually two opinions.
Right. Sure.
Now this is another thing that the Rebbe commonly does. He takes like two opinions that a scholar might brush over.
Say they both are right.
And say they're not only both right, but these are essential in our understanding. You know. Das ist eigentlich der Bediuk von Lashon Shas Bikish Yaakov Lagalis when Nistalk min Shechina nit stam when Nistalk min Haketz. That's why it says the Shechina left him, right? Divine presence withdrew from him. Because if you would say it left him, maybe that's the information left him.
Oh, right.
Right? But it's saying no. It seems like it's saying no. He remembered the information. Just the divine presence withdrew from him. I don't know what it's like to feel like a prophet, but he felt like, boy, God really doesn't want me to say this.
Yeah, sure.
Va'loit the Shas is Taka Yaakov Niskas Gevarn der Kates. Es ist bloß Nisalat Gevarn von ihm, die Shechina, hat gesehen, als man will nicht die Gilo Yaketz, hat nicht Megala gewählt. According to this understanding, the Talmud is highlighting that the knowledge of when the end of days would arrive was not hidden from Jacob. It was only that the divine presence withdrew from him. However, the withdrawal of the divine presence caused him to realize that revealing information was not desired.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, he did not divulge it to his son. Or another thing is, or we could say, Shechina von Lashon Shechanti b'Seicha. What does divine presence mean? Well, actually, the last Kabbalah class is actually supposed to be the best class. From teachers already gave it. It's about the why. You know, until now we've explained what happened, but what's the ultimate purpose of the Hishtalshel? What's the ultimate purpose? So we're introducing this verse. The Torah says, "You should build for me a tabernacle, and I will dwell in it." This is a big word. Shochen means to dwell, to live in it. So dwell in it means I will dwell amongst them. Das heißt, der Koyach zu kennen Mashkin Mamshech sein dem Gila Ketz Lamat Levanav. So it means the implication is that the potential to draw down and dwell amongst his sons.
The knowledge.
So Yaakov was like, I'm not able. So either it means that he just felt a sensation and he stopped, or he said, you know, Ed, I could tell you, but you're just not going to get it. I'm not able to draw down on you. So davon verstehen wir, weil das Kamul Chaldees kennen der Eberster abhalten Yaakov zum Magal sein der Ketz Levanav afilo oiv Yaakov weist dem Ketz. Was ist my time? Was Leute der Rishon is gewähren der Maschine der Ketz in Nistam gewähren from Yaakov. So because obviously God can communicate with Jacob, according to the second opinion, what is the idea? What's the purpose of God making Jacob forget? Not only is he not able to tell his kids, there's two stages here. Number one, he wants to tell his kids. That means he knows the knowledge and he wants to share it.
Right.
God can either take away the ability to share it or the knowledge itself.
Right.
So, according to the opinion that God took away the knowledge itself, what is the significance of taking the knowledge itself? In other words, why is Jacob not meant to know anymore?
Well, the most obvious thing is because he was going to tell his son.
Yeah, correct. But why was God like? God could have communicated.
Don't say anything.
Could have said, don't say anything, or the Shekhinah could have left him, whatever. So what we're going to do here, we're going to explain. Now, what we're going to explain is what exactly did Jacob know, right? That's an important factor as well. What exactly did Jacob know? Now,
we have no clue. Well, there's no point in the literal Torah. It never says God said these things to Jacob.
Well, all it says is Jacob wanted to say the end of days.
Right, but before that, we don't have any incident, any event where God.
Well, obviously, yeah. So obviously, God gave him some knowledge that he withheld. So we're gonna have to explain like what exactly would he have told him, like what exactly would he tell them? Because if the Torah uses the term, now it's interesting in the beginning here, we know the term the end of days is from Daniel. Daniel says the end of days. The thing is Jewish tradition is it's cryptic, it's hidden. It's hidden how to learn it out from Daniel. So much so that one of the translators, the original translators of the Tanakh, um, God told him kind of, you can translate the whole Tanakh, but don't translate Daniel clearly, because it's supposed to be hidden.
It's very confusing.
So we have this idea of the end of days, the secret of the end of days being hidden, but that also leads to another question: why does God place it in a prophet, but it's hidden? What's the purpose of that? So we will actually answer that in this talk here, because it's an interesting thing. Now, if you look online, there's even many rabbis who say, and it's in Daniel it says at the end of how to take it out. But here we'll actually talk about the end of days with a different perspective, which will clear up things in a certain sense. And the Rebbe he's going to take a bunch of different other places in Torah and put together a thesis here, a theory. So that's what we said so far. So far, just to summarize, we asked what essentially is the difference between what essentially was Jacob trying to do, what was God trying to do, what was the benefit for Jacob, what was the benefit for his sons, there's obviously a communication here with God and Jacob. Why the extent? Why, according to some opinions, did he actually forget it himself? According to other opinions, the Shekhinah withdrew from him.
And what did he know?
And what did he know? Right? These are all important things. And obviously, that's an interesting thing. I'm sure Jacob told his sons many more things that are not written in the Torah,
Sure,
right?
course.
And the Torah wants us to A, know that he wanted to tell them. B, and these are all good questions. He wanted to tell them that he wasn't able to tell them, that there's a concept he wanted to tell them, right? It could be that there were other things that Jacob wanted to tell them, and God said no, and we don't even know about them.
Yeah.
Right? Because Jacob didn't communicate, maybe. Maybe that happened personally, So this is a very interesting subject.
We didn't know whether he could not tell them because he forgot, or he decided not to tell them.
Correct. Well, or God either God communicated to him.
God told him not to.
Through
Like
God either communicated to him through some sensation, or he communicated to him by telling him, "Hey, you don't remember." He wasn't able to tell him. So yeah, among them we said, we said possible 3 explanations.
Yeah.
God either communicated to him through kind of like a natural, he forgot, or God communicated to him through another sensation. In other words,
God could also have told him.
Yeah, maybe that's what it means that God took the Shekhinah away. It's not clear what it means. The Shekhinah,
anything, a verbal command or a withdrawal of the presence.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So let's do. Did Yaakov know? So let's do number 3, and then we'll finish with that. Okay. Mikol Anal, let's move on. As Beida Oifanim, both approaches, Megalazain, other Nit Megalazain, whether to reveal to him or not to reveal to him, can bring in Atayalas Faryidin. We know that there's an advantage in him telling from the story. There's an advantage in him telling, an advantage from him not telling, right? I don't think, I think it's pretty clear to the Rebbe that Yaakov wasn't like, let me share some random, inside information for no reason. He's on his deathbed. He's sharing something that's meaningful. Yeah, we're talking about Jacob. So there's an advantage in him sharing that. And it can't be that God says, no, you're wrong. It has to be that God is saying, this other advantage outweighs the advantage that you were going to bring. Right. So both sides have to have an advantage. Or Nachmer, Ribaldas Yaakov is einer von the Avis. So because Jacob is one of the forefathers, now this is something that says about the forefathers. Hein Henem Arkava, they were a chariot. The forefathers are a chariot.
A chariot?
A chariot. Chariot to who? The origin of this, here it's quoting from the Tanya, but I believe there's actually another origin. Give me a second.
Certainly the chariot sold for the sublime.
So this is something common in Jewish talk. What does a chariot mean? It means they had no will other than God's will. They were
The patriarchs
the
were
patriarchs.
chariot.
They were the chariot. They were fully subdued to God, fully surrendered to God, right? So anything they do is as good as God saying it.
Oh, really?
Is muchach zu sagen, als das, was Bikish Yaakov legal ist, bis zu der Rega, wenn es Talke, wenn es Schchina, es gewinnt behessen zu Ratzalien, zu welche Yaakov is gewinnt am Merkava, euch damals. It must be that if Jacob wanted to do it, there would be a valid reason why God would want to do it. In other words,
he's carrying out God's
he's
will.
carrying out God's will. He's doing it only for God's will. And
Right.
God says, that's a good point, Jacob, but I want you to nonetheless do it for another point. So now what the Rebbe is doing with this is he's saying, like, we can't just say Jacob is wrong. And because we know from different sources, we can't just say Jacob is flat out wrong. Now when we know that he's not flat out wrong, we'll search for deeper perspective in this story.
In other words, assume he was doing the correct thing, but he got over.
Yeah, there was something which was more correct.
Yeah.
And this is actually the Rebbe's way of doing it in every conversation in the Torah. Like when Moses tells God, don't send me, send someone else.
Mm-hmm.
The Rebbe says, well, it can't be just Moses is saying, don't do it like a regular human. And he digs in and he explains there's really a tremendous depth in that conversation. Moses is right, and God is right.
Moses was scared, wasn't he?
Well, so it can't just be he was scared on a simple level. That's what the Rebbe feels. It can't just be he was scared on a simple level. It has to be that Moses has a case built up. He has a case for God, and God is essentially telling him, you have a point, but this is more of a true point.
I think that, and then after a few more exchanges, God says, I'm running out of patience. Can you imagine that?
Yeah. So
Can you imagine God running out of patience?
Well, so this is really like a very deep way of understanding the Torah, which the Rebbe was very into. Where each of these conversations, it's like they're teaching deep lessons.
Yeah.
Moses was smart and he was holy, and he's telling God, he's petitioning something holy to God, and God is petitioning something back, even something even holier. So here also must be that Jacob is saying, this is what God would want. And God agrees.
Yeah.
There is a reason why I would want that. You're right. However, on das was Zebershrat Lepayel Nitter Lazen, God didn't let Jacob, as Jacob soll sehen, Megala sein der Kates, is weil in jenem Matzav hat sich gedarft, der Eufen an Hagar, und die Teieles, was kommt zu der Kates, soll nicht ins Gala werden. It must be that God was like, you're right, but in this context, it's not the right context. You were right in a certain context, but in this context, it's not the right context. Und dabei sein Vernan zwei Deas. And because of this, there are two opinions. Leut ein Dea hat die Teils gedarf sein euch bei Yaakov Atzmai und der River Niskasa euch von Mena Akates. One opinion says, well, because this is not the right thing, you should not know you also shouldn't know.
Yeah.
Leut der zweite Dea is das an Inyan, was is given when they get blows to the Shvatim. According to the second opinion, God said, you should know, but your sons should not know.
So what do you think, what does the Rebbe say the advantage to Yaakov's knowing?
Well, we'll explain all this. We'll explain, yeah. Und der Pfarrers when Yaakov and allein nitnes Gasse geworden. So God said, yeah, there's a reason you need to know, but your kids, sometimes Jacob might think that his kids are on his level. They might think like, you're on his level. Now, there's another midrash that I'll just tell you outside, which is an amazing midrash, and it's a source of an amazing custom. We say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Va'ed. It comes from this story in the Torah.
Oh, really?
Because Jacob, and the midrash says, we'll stop here, but in the midrash it says that Jacob was about to tell them, and then he felt God doesn't want him to do it, and he thought maybe one of my sons are not on the right level, they're not worthy of hearing. And then the Medrash says, the kids said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. They said, Dad, Yisrael, Israel, is Jacob. They said, God is one. We're all holy.
Yeah.
And then he said, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Va'ed. He said, blessed is God whose kingdom is on all my children.
Say that again.
So the origin of why in the prayers we say Shema and Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Va'ed. Again, in the Torah, the Shema